Today I just want to talk quite briefly about scales and why they're useful. If you've had piano lessons in the past and you've given up, having to play scales is probably one of the reasons why you did, because they are a grind, they are boring, especially if you're a kid. And you know, if you're 9 or 10 years old and your piano teacher is making you go up and down the keyboard doing this endlessly, it just seems pointless. You don't have to play scales to be a handy pianist, especially if you're playing sort of jazz, blues, pop, that kind of thing. But they do make a big difference. The main reason they make a difference is because they promote strength and control in your hands. One of the things I sometimes talk about, go on about relentlessly really, is the fact that, especially if you're playing improvisation styles, it's very easy to become reliant on just a limited number of fingers. So typically that's thumb and fifth in the left hand, and most of all thumb, second and third in the right. And it's very easy to neglect fingers like your third and fourth in the left hand and your third, fourth and fifth in the right. And the consequence of that is that they kind of get weak, you don't have such good control over them. So because they're a little bit weaker and you don't have such good control over them, you use them less, and it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you know what I mean. So being able to use all your fingers equally will ultimately make you a much better pianist. It will give you much better control on the keyboard, and it will give you a much greater sort of range and freedom when you're improvising. If you play classical piano, and I'm going to talk about classical piano in a future video because it's got a lot to teach us, even if we're only interested in jazz and blues. But if you play classical, then playing scales is really important, because you need to keep all 10 fingers really as limber as possible. So that's what scales do. They promote strength and independence in each of your fingers equally. Okay. So that's the basic message. It is worth learning how to play scales. If you've had lessons in the past, you can probably dredge up your scales from memory because you played them so much. If you've never played scales before, if you're entirely self-taught, there are a few options out there. You can find most scales on the web. I'll teach you how to play a simple scale in a second. Another really good resource is this, the Manual of Scales, Broken Chords and Arpeggios for Piano, which is published by the Royal Schools of Music. And it has got everything in it, every single scale you could ever possibly need. And quite a few you won't, like scales in double thirds you don't really need to bother with, but all the sort of similar motion, contrary motion scales are in here, okay? Along with, and this is the really crucial thing, along with the fingerings you need for them, because the secret of success with scales is to know your fingerings. So, if you had piano lessons in the past, think about dredging up scales from the bottom of your memory. If you are completely new to scales, well, pick up some of the stuff I'm about to show you, but also think about a resource like the Manual of Scales and Arpeggios. You'll find it on Amazon. It's by Ruth Gerald, and as far as I know, you can get it all over the world. You better get it in the States as well. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a flavour of how scales work, I'm just going to look at the simplest scale of all, C major, in the right and left hands. We call it the simplest of all because it's all white notes. There are no black notes in C major. Okay. Let's just have a look at C major in the right hand over 2 octaves. Coming down. Okay. Quite straightforward and simple. Look at what you're doing. We're going 1, 2, 3, thumb under. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the harder stretch. Thumb under, 2, and then it repeats. And then when we get to the top, we go to the fifth and back down. You can do that over as many octaves as you like, just using the thumb under. I can't talk and play at the same time. Just using the thumb under to the B. Okay, and then when you get to the last octave, if you want to play, just use your pinky and come back down again. Okay, so quite simple. In the left hand, you should be able to see this, quite simple as well. We go like this, third over, fourth over, and this is where the strength building in that fourth finger really comes in, the left hand. Okay, so hit the thumb at the top, hit our thumb at the top. This talking and playing business is so difficult, I just can't do it. And come back down again. Thumb under, and thumb under. Okay, so if you're really new to scales, just copy what I did there, right and left hand, a few times, and maybe just take it over 1 octave to start with, and then do 2 octaves, and then 3, and then 4, and then however many you can fit in, yeah, depending on your piano or keyboard. Don't just be mechanical about it, listen to what you're doing. The trick, the real art, is to make it as even as possible, which is actually really hard, to sound exactly the same weight on every single note. And the reason it's hard is because you get what I call thumpy thumb, okay? Whenever your thumb goes over, it naturally accentuates itself. I'm exaggerating, obviously. And the trick is to make every note sound equal. And it's really, really, really hard. I used to be able to do it when I had really regular classical piano lessons when I was a kid and later when I was at university. My scales were very even, but unless you really, really practice them, like, you know, a professional classical pianist, you will lose the evenness quite quickly. And they don't need to be super even if you're just playing jazz and blues and pop and stuff, or even if you're playing classics for fun. But it's a kind of ideal to aspire to, okay? So listen to what you're doing, go for the evenness, the tone, and feel, especially, make sure you're giving equal weight to those so-called weak fingers, 3, 4 and 5, and 3 and 4 in your left, okay? When you've got a bit of confidence, try 2 hands together. There we go. You might not be aware of it, but I'm painfully aware of my thumpy thumb, especially on the way down. It really is. But it takes a lot of practice to get them really, really, really even. And you don't really need to go that far. But getting your scales to a good standard gives you a lot of strength and confidence and balance on the keyboard and a better touch. And especially if you're new at the piano, sometimes your hand can feel really sort of stiff and it's difficult to relax it because you're wondering what you're going to be doing next, but it gives you that fine control that lets you relax. If you listen to a lot of pop musicians especially who haven't been trained how to play the piano, haven't spent a lot of time playing scales and classics when they were a kid, and the example I always give here is Paul McCartney and John Lennon, they sound quite awkward. Yeah, it's a tiny bit stilted. Okay, and that's because they haven't spent that time, put those hours in playing the scales. So think seriously about doing some work on scales, even if you only do 5 or 10 minutes a day to start with. You know, work through them and you will quickly find it does develop your strength. As I've said, the other side of the coin here is playing a little bit of classical music, but we'll talk about that later in a future video. So there we go. If you've got any questions, let me know. What day is it today? It's the 19th of April. I'm off on holiday. Yippee. Yeah, off on holiday for 10 days. So if you do send me a question and I don't reply straight away, sorry about that, but I will get back to you when I get back from the vineyards and chateaux of central France. So there we go. Okay. I might do some more stuff on scales if it's something that people are interested in, but if you do want to take your scales further, do think about the manual of scales, broken chords and arpeggios, because all the fingering and stuff in there is absolutely great, really invaluable. Okay, you might also, while I'm on the subject of books, think about my book, How to Really Play the Piano, the stuff your teacher never taught you. Blues, improvisation, you know the drill. If you've seen my videos before, you know all about how to really play the piano. So there we go. I hope that was useful.